Thank you, Mott. Thank you to G5A, Culturebagh, and a big thank you and gratitude to Chatterjee and Lal because this this project that I've been working on for the past several years, a research into the life of Riten Mozumdar, it started out as a personal passion, and then in the last 1.5 years, Mott and I have been working very closely, and the exhibition that was ongoing at the gallery is based on the material that I have been able to source and a lot of the information that I have been able to unearth in these past few years. So without further ado, let's go into this. So I start Riten's journey when he was a student in Santiniketan. So he joins Santiniketan as a student almost at the same time as when India is at the cusp of independence. So his attitude towards how he perceives design and how he looks at art generally is, I feel, very strongly rooted in the education that he received there. So if we can put a little mind to what Tagore had in mind when he designed Santiniketan, he took on a lot from Bauhaus. So his idea was to introduce arts and craft as part of the curriculum there, which would in effect allow students to not be compartmentalized, or they would. He also, Nandalal, his teacher there, also introduced a lot of the crafts and the village, especially they looked at the indigenous cultures of the Bengal village. And that I think sowed the first seeds of his way of looking at art. So then this is here, these photographs that you see are from his student days in Kala Bhavan. On the right hand side, you see in the center Binod Bihari Mukherjee, who became his mentor, and he had a profound influence on how Riten's career shaped and how in the beginning he looked at design. So he was, in a sense, a product of a schooling which emphasized the engagement of the arts and the crafts. So again, a few images, as we can see, these are the studies that he did while he was a student, tempera painting of flower study, turning it into design, and then a terracotta bas relief that he did under Ramkinkar Bej. So in a sense, when Riten was a student, he was getting the best of the three teachers who were the foundation of Santiniketan School, as in Nandalal Bose, Ramkinkar Bej, and Binod Bihari Mukherjee. So, it can be termed that Santiniketan was unequivocally what he builds his career later on. So then from there, he passes out around the 1950s, and he accompanies Binod Bihari to Nepal. Binod Bihari was invited to become the museum keeper of the Nepal museum, and he invites Riten to accompany him there. And he goes and spends a year with Binod Bihari, learning under a very famous craftsman called Kulasundar Shilakarmi, and he learns block printing, he learns textile design, he learns how to carve sculptures in wood and stone, he learns metal crafts, and also banner painting. So this is actually where he starts appreciating the crafts and this lifelong involvement with indigenous arts and crafts. He realizes that the utility value of an object sometimes makes design more complex, and he began toying with the idea of contemporizing these age-old ideas. So by the time he completes his Nepal sojourn and accompanies Binod Bihari back to Delhi and then onwards to Mussoorie, where Binod Bihari opens a printing school. He makes his own blocks, and Riten helps him to print out textiles, and they start a small unit, which ultimately doesn't run very well. But I think that is where he gets his first idea of how to make textiles and how to sell them. But this is from the 50s and 51, and these are exhibitions that Binod Bihari had with Leela Mukherjee, his wife, and Riten Mozumdar, as he was also known as Ritendra at that time. So he was part of that. Then Riten comes back to Delhi, and he jumps into this whole nascent design scenario, and he becomes part of a lot of the government institutions. He is taken under the wing by Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay. He starts a small unit, printing blocks, making toys, making sculptures. So one of his one of his very first public art projects is the image that you see on top. It's a bas relief in wood for the Post and Telegraph Centenary Exhibition in 1953 and 54. And around the same time, he was part of the Living India exhibitions at MoMA, New York, and his works, textile works, were selected by Edgar Kaufman Jr., the then curator. He executed several murals. Notable amongst these were commissions of the Khadi village industries and the Post and Telegraph one that you see there. So this is an example of a wooden toy. So Bengal had a history of wooden toys, indigenous folk toys. Riten takes this on. He modifies the design. He adds cubistic elements to it. He makes it more interesting. He uses a lot of different colors. And on top, the image that you see is a magazine, the Illustrated Weekly of India from 1954, which shows his his textiles. By 1954, he has just come back as a student, and he's already made a mark. And this is a page from a book called Handicrafts of India. It was edited by Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay, and it was published by All India Handicrafts Board in 1959. And it shows some of these toys and some of his textiles, and actually proclaims that Riten Mozumdar is this young new designer who's doing very exciting work. So by this time, he was already making a name for himself, and he's having exhibitions. So that helps him to get a scholarship to study in Yugoslavia under the sculptor Boris Kalin at the Academy of Fine Arts, Ljubljana. And here he learns, the academic style of sculpture, which is such a marked departure from his previous training at either Santiniketan or Nepal. And while he was there in Yugoslavia, he again receives a bursary to travel in Europe, in Italy especially. So he makes these journeys, and then he went to Finland, and he was working in a ceramic factory called Arabia, when Marimekko founder Armi Ratia, she heard of this Indian who was working there. She went and they started collaborating. He worked with Marimekko between 1956 and 57 for a year. So on the left is Riten with Armi Ratia, and from what you can see in the image, the textiles that he's carrying with him, I obviously surmise that these are the textiles that he was carrying with him to his whatever he had been practicing, because this shows a very markedly Santiniketan Binod Bihari influence in his work. And on the right is one of the early designs that he made. So there's some pieces missing, but it's part of a larger design. But again, it is in the ethos of the Santiniketan design schooling. But then while he was here, there is a marked change in how he starts designing. So these are some of the designs that he made there, and especially the central design. It's called Benu Bono, which in Bengali means bamboo groves. And this is a design that we do see him repeating, in various permutations later in his life. And this dress that you see on the extreme right, it's a revival of that vintage design that Riten had made in 56, 57, and this revival was in 2013 by Marimekko. On the left is called Rajputana. So in a sense that although he's now looking at a more minimal approach, he's still quite rooted, and especially I feel that the names are a giveaway. The names that he gives to these designs when he's calling it Rajputana or Benu Bono, he in a sense is bringing that connection with his roots. Actually, it's interesting if I can go back one slide. So this design that you see, it's called Tramontana. And Tramontana is an Italian word for the cold, eastern air. So when he's making an Indian design, he's giving it a European name. But when he's making a more minimal design, he's coming back to his roots. So this is a very interesting interplay of how he may have been thinking of taking these designs forward. And these are, they move away from that earlier lyricism towards a more crisper and pared down approach. Although a full-blown abstract move would still take him a few more years. So this is a narrative that I've tried to create by looking at images from that period but separated by several years. So this is a photograph that I found in his archives, and it's a photograph of the Piazza della Civiltà Italiana. And I have found a lot of architectural photographs by him throughout his career. So he is looking at a lot of architectural elements to create the design. And the one above is Jeffree. It is from Marimekko. This block, he comes back to, when he returns back to India, he creates this block because Monica has a lovely story to tell about this block. And this is Monica wearing a sari made from that block. It is called Rome by Night. And so this constant interplay between him where he's emulating different inspirations and looking to different aspects of his experiences that I find very, very interesting. Then once he returns, he just bursts onto the scene. He starts his workshop called IMPRINT from a garage, and within a year's time, he moves to an Okla industrial estate with 20 odd people working under him, and there's a huge demand for his work because as of yet, nobody had ever seen the kind of work that he was doing. The kind of imagery that he was bringing into his blocks. He's looking at completely different elements. He's looking at elements that people have never used before. So at this time, he starts collaborating with All India Handicrafts Board, cottage industries, and he looks at a lot of text. So this is the time when I see that he starts using a lot of text, and this becomes almost a leitmotif throughout his career, culminating, towards the end of his career in his beautiful calligraphic paintings. So these are some of his archival blocks, and you may have seen the archival block print that we have kept here, one of the fishes. So that can be traced back to an earlier ethos, but from this period, 1959, 60s onwards, a lot of text. And what's interesting is he's looking at text irrespective of the source. Sometimes it is from Arabic, Persian text. He's taking from Hindu religious texts. Sometimes he's even, creating his own superimpositions of Bengali text. For instance, in this one. So that's a superimposition of a lot of text. This is Devanagari. So he's used Persian, Tibetan, Pali, Devanagari, Sanskrit, and he looks at very different inspirations. So looking at the Namavali Gamchas, taking the Ram Nam from there. But what I feel is very important is that these texts are celebrated purely for their visual element. And in some, interviews in his time, he also very clearly said that he is not using texts, especially the ones that have been taken from religious, motifs. He's not looking at text as it is used in its capacity, but as a visual element only, divorced from any social or religious contexts. And he's sometimes with superimpositions, he renders them quite indecipherable. And he used seals and other stamps and elements. So this work, it's called Barber Seal, and it's a screen print from the mid to the late 1960s. So this is a very important moment when he's taking a tiny 1-inch piece of an element and then he's blowing it up. He's almost contemporizing the way in which he's recontextualizing the image. But as a designer, he always keeps thinking like an artist. So most of his pieces are one-off pieces, handmade. Even when he's using blocks, they are hand blocks. Sometimes he carves his own blocks. Sometimes he works with lineal, block makers. And hand-painted calligraphy remains quite an important aspect of his work. So as I mentioned, he worked with a lot of the government bodies, and especially with All India Handicrafts Board. He was a design advisor to them, and he worked tirelessly to revive the jali work from Saharanpur in UP, ivory inlay furniture industry of Hoshiarpur in Punjab. And as a further proof of his ingenuity, so as I said, a lot of architectural photographs. So this is one of the photographs that I found in his archive. And then you can see how he has translated this into the dice, which goes on to these piras and the tables. So what I have understood from the research is that these lineal, these craftsmen were making furnitures, were using jali work, but those were very rudimentary or raw in nature. Riten brings into it a finesse, and he also introduces these elements from architecture. So in a sense, he's adding lightness, he's adding a porosity to these objects which might have been very heavy, and he's bringing this art historical perspective into crafts. So that is where I think is something very interesting is happening in the way he assimilates this knowledge that comes to him via his art education. And he also designed a lot of contemporary furniture, especially for taru. He worked a lot with taru, and these had noticeable Japanese, Scandinavian influences, although sometimes jute strings were added to weave the seats, adding an indigenous twist. His contemporary designs were indicative of the tastes of the time, very low seating, minimal in lines, simple and quite fuss-free. So if I can just go back a bit, in 1960 when he was coming back from Europe, he meets Charles Correa on the ship back to India, and they forge a friendship which was to last a lifetime. And Charles also designed his house in Delhi, and this is a interior image that he designed in 1972, and these are some of in these coverage of that interior in Inside Outside magazine, and you can see the Barber Seal, the piras, and some of his namdas, which I'm going to show later. So now, around this time, around the late 60s and 70s, Riten starts working with a lot of interior designers, architects especially. All the major architects of the time, including Jasbir Sajdev, Raj Rawal, Riten worked with them to design interiors, and sometimes also on public projects as the India Art, we know as the trade fairs would happen. So here is a silk wall mural by him at Akbar Hotel 1972, and this is Bangalore 1972 Ashoka restaurant. So you can see that the works that he has done using text as well as imagery, I may go as far to say that they almost precede Raza's work by a decade, where Raza, the similarity is striking. And in these, he's used a lot of text and also the image of the circular mandalas, which at the time he was called that he was pointed out that you're taking these from tantric art. So Riten denied that. He said he was not really interested in tantric art, but because he was looking at something that is pared down, the geometric shape, so there is a similarity, one could make linkages in that. So these are some projects that he did in collaboration with Sajdev Eggleston Associates. So on the left, the larger image is the India Pavilion in Algiers, Punjab Pavilion for National Exhibition at the All India Congress session in Chandigarh, and which won a gold medal. So this image is from the Expo 72 at Osaka, Japan. It's a very tiny image that has been blown up. So, but one can see the, Riten's work in the pavilion inside. So most of his these associations were involving a range of projects like urban planning, landscape design, institutional buildings. These are a couple of very important projects that he did, and this is the BHEL Asia 72 Pavilion, where the whole sheathing was designed by Riten. And again, he used these very minimal forms. And on the right is the Indian Engineering Trade Fair of 1975 at the Hall of Nations, which was sadly razed down. So you can see what he did here. These are huge monumental mobiles that he had created. It was almost 20 meters in width and 12.5 meters in height, and they were promoted as the world's largest mobile sculptures. And it was also a sign of the times that even these public art projects were inviting artist designers like Riten to come on board and create something completely different, which had not been seen before. And he did a lot of projects at this time in other countries as well: Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Nepal, Thailand. And in each instance, his vision of the design element was always integral to the project as a whole. So he was always working in collaboration with the architects and engineers, and keen understanding of the possibility of the material that was being used. So now we come to another very important aspect of his career. So in his capacity as advisor to All India Handicrafts Board, Riten had worked with the Namda and Gabba makers of Kashmir. And then he found the material very interesting, and he started using it in his own capacity as an artist. And here I find an interesting thing happening. Now he takes this woolen rug, which was mostly used for the floor, and he transforms this, by the use of color, into these objects that could now be put up on the walls. They became something divorced from their original usage, and the way that, and this became a very, very important aspect of his practice. He had many exhibitions in India as well across the world, and these two are on the left. These are images from his tie and dye solo show at the Contemporary Crafts Museum in New York City in 1971. And on the right-hand side he was part of a group exhibition for the floor. Apart from this, he had a solo show in the Danish Museum in Copenhagen. Because of the importance of his namdas and the way they had taken root in the public imagination, you could see his work appear on a lot of magazines inside, outside. the center one is the Design magazine, which was edited by Patwan Singh, an extraordinary magazine which had people like Isamu Noguchi as the advisor. And on the right is on the cover page of Illustrated Weekly. So in a sense, he was a very, very important part of the culture makers of the time. He was part of he was an intrinsic part of a new design field, but he was also a trendsetter. So he was creating new languages. A page from his design sketchbook for Namdas. And this Namda, as it says on the back, was bought by the Air India collection for them. This you might have seen if those who have visited the exhibition. So it's an amazing piece of felted wool with embroidery, tie and dye, and resist block print. This is a very hard material to work with. It's a thick wool rug, and Riten creates this amazingly luminous, colors in this material. So apart from all that other things that he was doing, furniture and public projects, namdas, and so he was also designing clothes for companies like Fab India, Design Thai Bangkok, and another label, Pallavi, with Bharti Sharma of Delhi. And these were being exported to the Middle East, Australia, Canada. His clothing line, like all his work, was again very simple, striking, and used dramatic geometric motifs to create an allure. So this one work on the right side, if I may say, this is an anecdote I just learned of a couple of days before I came here, that the design that he creates, he makes a block out of bamboo. So this is a kind of a chatai or a mat that he creates with bamboo, and then takes the print with that. And in a sense, the story goes back. He had narrated this to somebody that when he was a student in Santiniketan, he was always being asked to make floral motifs by Gauri Bhanja, who was the teacher of design. And he rebelled. He did not like floral motifs. So he rebelled and he did not want to make that. And he told Gauri that I want to make something with bamboo. And she would not allow him. And so he was taken off to see the principal, Nandalal Bose. So Nandalal told him, okay, you can make this design, which he did, and that design is lost. But Riten said that lesson that he had from Nandalal, who had drawn a bamboo design for him, which he lost, that was the inspiration behind him making Benu Bono and later on these designs, using the original bamboo framework. Again, some designs. And another interesting bit of news that I could uncover, this on the left, the lady on the left is Neelima Sheikh, and she said that she was one of the first people to have modeled his clothes for cottage industries way back, 1970s. Another design of a butterfly dress with a sketchbook, simply stunning piece of material. If you visited the exhibition, you may have seen this. So a very important phase of Mozumdar's career was his association with Fab India, which began in 1966 and lasted until 2000. So John Bissell and Mozumdar were really close friends, and John respected and admired Riten's aesthetics. And when Fab India was looking to make a contemporary line of designs, John called on his friend, and Riten created these striking, geometric, simplified works that just took everybody by storm. And Miss Meena Chaudhary, who associated with Fab India for a very long time, says that people started buying these bed covers and material like hotcake, and they would put it in their bedrooms and started leaving their bedroom doors open so that people would. It was a coveted object. It was no more something that was just a bed cover. And many times people would say, we want to put them up on our wall, frame them and put them up on our walls. And these objects have looked at design in a sense that releases them from daily usage, but could also be looked at as a work of art. But here I would also like to add a very interesting, you know, thing, that Riten was colorblind. So he actually never was able to see the colors that he used. So he understood color only through the use of, or only through the hues that he could perceive. And that is why I think he uses a lot of the basic colors in his work and not many of the mixed colors. The primary colors are absolutely the ones that he focuses on almost entirely in his oeuvre. And Fab India, so that association was a very long association. Article on Riten in Eve's Weekly 1983, and on the right is a poster of from 1978 exhibition at Jahangir Art Gallery promoting Riten's collection for Fab India. These are some of his iconic design called Target, and brilliant piece of design. And this was one of the most favorite selling design. Looking at Fab India's reach, this Jeffree Baba was a big fan. So this on the left hand side is from the Jeffree Baba Trust in Sri Lanka, interior of Charles and Monica's house. I even found some reference of cushion covers while I was watching Masoom the film. So you never even knew that you had a Riten or you had seen it, but it was part of the whole cultural milieu at architect Ram Sharma's house. So in effect, his reach was really large, and he had covered so much in his lifetime. Around 1988, he returns back to Santiniketan, and he creates this, starts creating this, calligraphic paintings based on Tagore's poetry. Most of them are texts taken from various Tagore's poetry, and here, I think, in a way, one sees the culmination of his usage, or his how he looks at calligraphy or text. Here, the text is, I feel, no more anymore divorced from its inherent meaning, because when he's taking text from very particular poems which deal with poignant, last days or setting of the sun, so then he infuses or imbues that idea of the poetry into his text. So this he works between the late 1980s to the mid 1990s, after which he kind of falls sick a bit and works very intermittently. And coming to the last slide, so Professor Ashok Chatterjee has been guiding me a lot in my research, and he says documenting designers like Riten Mozumdar is critical to the understanding of contemporary Indian design, and that at the moment there is little or no access, understanding, awareness of what pioneers did to open the space that newer generations now enjoy. Their sense of heritage is about the distant past, not the post-independence period preceding the founding of NID. So in a sense, it is very important. It becomes a very important task to look at that period of our modernist design histories. And I think what the exhibitions at Chatterjee and Lal with IMPRINT, and now earlier with Impact, I think more of such scholarship is needed to open up the space or to find out more about these early pioneers. Thank you very much. And I'm going to be taking this lecture on in a series. So I'm going to NID on the 3rd, and from there to MSU. So please share with your friends about the dates. Thank you very much.